Yes. Today's Women's Observance speaker is a voice and a force. At this moment in our history, where we need her power and her clarity and her commitment to collaboration more than we ever have. Nicole Austin-Hillery is the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, a valued NEA partner in the fight for racial and social justice. They advance the global Black community by developing leaders, informing policy, and educating the public. We are honored to have such a phenomenal woman with us today. And we are certainly blessed that we have her at the helm of this important partnership organization as we, the NEA, join with others to promote and to protect and to strengthen public education. In her words and in her actions, Nicole reminds us that power is on the ballot come this November. That's what's on the ballot. That the wheels of democracy are still spinning despite all of the efforts to halt them. And that we must always be ready to use our voice, to exercise our right to vote, and to use our power. And I want to share with you that Nicole is not just an incredible leader. She is a phenomenal human who I am blessed to call a very close friend. Here to tell you more about our amazing speaker is an amazing woman herself. Yes. Now, she also is a KC fan, but we're going to put that over here for a minute. The chair of our Women's Issues Committee, Miss Jamila. Yeah, I'm not going to bother you anymore. I'm going to leave you alone, although she's wearing your color, though. I know it. Jamila has been hard at work as an educator in Kansas City in the role of a counselor, and we know that how important that role, that educator role, is in this moment. Jamila came into the union as an aspiring educator. Yeah. Continuing her leadership journey by serving as the secretary-treasurer and as the vice president at the local level. Today, she helps to advance and lead the work of the National Education Association as chair of the Women's Issues Committee. Please welcome Jamila Walton to share more about our guest speaker today. Give it up, give it up, give it up for Jamila.
Thank you so much, President Pringle, for that introduction, and let's go Chiefs. So the purpose and the objective of the Women's Observance is to strengthen our advocacy around issues, reflecting the power and promise of women and girls, and to grow our professional knowledge as racial and social justice advocates in our schools and communities. Today's speaker is well respected as a transformational leader in justice in her community and is undeniably committed to being a voice for society and those in society that they get often overlooked. At the Human Rights Watch, Nicole Austin-Hillery led efforts to address and combat systemic racism, improve U.S. immigration system, tackle rights problems within the domestic criminal justice system, and advocate for policies to address poverty and inequalities. Prior to the Human Rights Watch, she helped establish the Washington, D.C. office of the Brennan Center for Justice, an innovator in using law and policy to uphold the values of democracy. While at Brennan, Nicole oversaw the growth and development of the center's advocacy and policy development and served as its chief representative before Congress and the executive branch. These days, she leads the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, fueling an effort that builds power for the Black community and secures important wins for all across gender, race, place, and all ability by holding corporations and political leaders accountable. Nicole Austin-Hillery is an advocate, an activist, a public scholar, and an educator. And I'm honored to add NEA's 2024 Women's Observance Speaker. Team NEA, please join us in welcoming the powerhouse and force that is Nicole Austin-Hillery.
Good morning. Okay, I have a few housekeeping things I have to get out of the way before we get down to business. Okay. Number one, whatever, and I know this is a rule for all of you, whatever Becky Pringle asks me to do, I do. As Becky knows, my husband and I care for my lovely mother who just turned 80 2 weeks ago, Becky. We are her caregivers, and on Friday is the one day of the week that I do not have caregiving help. So my team said, Becky wants you to speak. And I said, okay, how am I gonna make this work? But I said, if this were anybody else, I would say, okay, I don't think we can make this work. But I said, but this is Becky Pringle. And I said, we're gonna make this work, and we made it work. That's housekeeping comment number one. Number two, I am wearing red today, but I am neutral about the Super Bowl. But I have to say that for those who are members of the Divine Nine, this is another shade of pink. I just want to be clear. This is just another shade of pink. But I love all of my sisters of the Divine Nine. Let me be clear. I love all of my sisters and brothers of the Divine Nine. I was just sharing a story with your team, Becky, that yesterday I was with the national president of Delta Sigma Theta, who did me a, yes, your president, who did me a lovely favor because I have a dear friend, one of my best friends from childhood, who herself has an autistic son and works with educators like you all to advocate on behalf of parents of autistic children. And because of the work she does and because of her own health issues, she cannot get out and be as active as she wants to be with the sorority. And I wanted her president to know about her, and I said, can we just call her? And right there in the middle, we were on the Hill at a Black History Month breakfast with the senators. And I said, can we just call her? And she said, Nicole, dial the number. And we dialed her up, and she gave her words of encouragement. So I share that to say all the members of the Divine Nine are just emblematic of what real leadership is. Yes. So Becky, thank you for this invitation. I do not take it lightly. I do not take it lightly. You all are an amazing organization. I have been in this room many times throughout my development. When I was 20-something, and I won't tell you all how long ago that was, when I was 20-something and moved to DC, I actually sat in this room for one of the first times for an Emily's List training for young women who wanted to be engaged in politics and advocacy. In this room. Yes, I have spent many days in this room plotting, planning, and strategizing how we save, protect, and elevate our democracy. NEA has always been at the forefront of that work. And for that reason, I am honored and privileged to call you all partners of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and honored and privileged to continue to get into good trouble with you all. So with that, let me start here. Becky, and I want you all to know, Becky and I did not exchange notes. We did not. We did not have a conversation about what I would say today. But because Becky is who she is, and because we are partners in crime in so many ways, it is no coincidence that our thinking is similar. Because Becky, the word that I wanted to start with today and that I really wanted to focus on was the word power. You've already elevated it, Becky, so I'm just going to pick up where you left off. You've passed the baton. I want to talk about power first off when it comes to educators and the power that you all have in this room. You all know that educators have the power to do one of two things. You have the power to build up, but you also have the power to tear down. I'm going to start with a tear down story. So I am from the great state, and I know I have fellow folks here from my wonderful home state of Pennsylvania. I'm from Harrisburg, the state capital. I still have people who, when I say I grew up in the capital of Pennsylvania, say, oh, you're from Philly, and I cringe. I'm like, no, it's Harrisburg. But I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I love my hometown. I have lived here for 31 years this year. I am married, as Becky knows, to a born and bred Washingtonian who continues to call me an interloper, and I say that's fine because I'm proud to be from Pennsylvania. But I grew up, yes, but I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and was educated in the public schools. I went to Harrisburg High School. And I grew up also proudly in one of the public housing developments in Harrisburg. I tell people I am a proud project girl. Now, when I was in high school, I was one of those kids who, I had wonderful educators. I achieved, I got good grades. I went to a performing arts magnet school half a day, and then the other half a day I went to my high school where I was in the gifted and talented program. And when it was time to apply for colleges, I was excited. And I had a wonderful teacher at my arts magnet school who was my drama teacher who said, Nicole, because you excel academically and you excel in terms of talent, artistic talent, you should focus on applying to some of the major universities in the country that have amazing academic programs and fine arts programs. And that's what I did. And I applied to, I think it was 7 or 8 universities, and I got into every one. And I remember I was so excited that the college career counselor at my high school, whose name was Mr. Sanchez, I couldn't wait to run into Mr. Sanchez in the hallway and tell him that I had gotten into every school that I had applied to, and to tell him which one I decided to attend. And when I saw Mr. Sanchez and all of my 17-year-old excitement, I was breathy, and I said, Mr. Sanchez, I got into every school. And I said, and this is the one I'm going to go to. And I was proud to say, I'm going to attend Carnegie Mellon University. And I was waiting with bated breath because I couldn't wait to hear what Mr. Sanchez had to say to me. And Mr. Sanchez looked at me with a straight face and he said, Nicole, that's good, but because you were raised in a single parent household and you live in public housing, you probably should go to one of the state schools. You can imagine how deflated I was. But Mr. Sanchez in that moment, I think, forgot that he had the power. He had the power to uplift me and to encourage me and to keep me moving. Now, I will say this to you. My husband tells me all the time, let go of the Mr. Sanchez story, but I know you all as educators, you know why I'm not letting go of that Mr. Sanchez story. So Mr. Sanchez's power at that moment could have been to lift me up, but those were words that have the effect of tearing me down. But unbeknownst to Mr. Sanchez, I became even more determined to attend Carnegie Mellon University and to achieve, because he was an educator who told me I couldn't. And those were words that I was taught a long time ago should not be in my vocabulary. Can't, not, and no. Now that was Mr. Sanchez. The power to uplift is the greatest power you all have. My 8th grade English teacher, Lynn Scott John, who taught me at the Harrisburg Middle School, who, by the way, is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. When we were in 8th grade, we did a whole segment on public speaking and speech and debate. And, we learned how to do extemporaneous speeches, prepared speeches. And at the end of 8th grade, Miss John gave me an award for the student most likely to succeed in a field involving public speaking. And we sat down at the end of 8th grade, and Miss John said, Nicole, what is it that you want to do when you grow up? And at that time, I said, Miss John, I'd like to be a courtroom stenographer. And she kind of looked at me strangely, and she said, well, that is a laudable profession, but why? And I said, because I have an after-school girls club program that I attend in my housing project and our community center. I said, and my counselor that I'm assigned to is Lisa, and she's so cool, and Lisa wants to be a courtroom stenographer, so if it's good enough for Lisa, it's good enough for me. And so Miss John, she smiled, and she stroked me, and she said, Nicole, that's lovely. She said, but you have a gift. And when you have a gift, you have an obligation to use that gift for good. But she also reminded me, she said, during this term of studying speech and debate, you always talked about a certain stream of issues. She said, you always talked about what it felt like to be a kid growing up in public housing. She said, you told us that you thought you grew up in an amazing community, which I did, where we kept the doors and windows open, where everybody knew everyone, where Miss Jackie was my babysitter down the street, and where if I did something wrong, Mom was going to hear about it before I had a chance to make up a story. That's the community I grew up in. And I told her that at some point, though, I learned that people on the outside didn't think my community was so great. That because we lived in government-subsidized housing, there were assumptions made about us. That we were not as smart as, that we were not going to achieve, that our parents weren't good parents like other parents, all because of our economic status. And I also tell people that for me, the reason why we were eligible to live in public housing was because I came from a single parent household. My mother spent her entire career and retired from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So my mother was a professional, as were some of the other mothers in our community. And Miss John said, you are always talking about rights, and she said it makes you angry whenever you talk about people discounting you. And she said, you know what people who feel like you do when they grow up, when they feel that passionate? She said, they grow up and they become civil rights and human rights lawyers. And from that day on, in 8th grade, at the age of 13, a light bulb went off, and I was bound and determined to grow up and be a civil and human rights lawyer, all because Miss John used her power to build up, to uplift as an educator. That's how she used that power. And so that's what I did. I pinch myself. Becky, I pinch myself every day because I can't believe that I actually got to grow up and do exactly what Ms. John helped me to see that day I should do. Now, I will tell you this. My work and everything that I have been focused on was started on that day, in that moment, talking to Miss John. I realized that I loved the community I grew up in. I realized that I loved the kids who had my experiences and looked like me and talked like me and sounded like me. I also realized unabashedly that I loved Black people. Yes. And that's not because I don't love everybody, because I do. But that is to say that what was instilled in me was that the community in which I lived, that some of the reasons why people discounted us and discarded us was only because of the color of our skin. And so for me, that made me dig in even deeper with my love and my devotion and my determination to make a difference for that community and for the community of people who were treated the same way. Because up the street from me were my friends from Puerto Rico, whose families had just come to the United States. My friends who were part of the Cambodian boat lift, who also, when they first came to the United States, had to live in public housing. We were all arm in arm walking these same paths together. And I knew that my love for people that look like me and people who have experiences like me would be how I needed to focus my career and what I did. And that's exactly how I've spent my life. If you talk to any of my friends from high school, they will jokingly say, she used to carry a briefcase. I didn't carry a briefcase. But they only say that because that's how they saw me, because that's how determined I was to do this work. So I continued this through college, through law school. I used to give heart palpitations to Mrs. Conti, who was the career services director at the only law school that one should attend in the United States, the Howard University School of Law, where Justice Thurgood Marshall was educated and where Charles Hamilton Houston got into good trouble by creating the strategy that undergirded Brown versus Board of Education. Mrs. Conti used to get heart palpitations because I said, Mrs. Conti, I'm not going to go to a big firm. She said, well, you know, you should diversify. Apply for big firms. Apply for judicial clerkships. I said, Ms. Conti, I told you when I walked in the door, I'm a project girl. I came here to be a civil and human rights lawyer so that I could do public interest work. And those are the only jobs I'm going to apply for, Ms. Conti. And she said, okay, do you? But that's what I did. And I started my legal career as the George N. Lindsay Civil Rights Law Fellow at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and I know you all know that organization well, and its president, Damon Hewitt, and the work that they do. And the first thing I focused on in my career was fighting against public housing discrimination while I was at the Lawyers Committee. Yes. And I went from there to a civil rights law firm. Yes, they do exist. A civil rights law firm where I worked on discrimination, but mostly gender discrimination, for women who had been discriminated against in corporate organizations and at other organizations, who had been sexually harassed. And I did that work on the class action level. And I spent 7 years of my career doing that. And then I got a call from the Brennan Center that said, you know, this work around race and justice that you are so committed to, you know that's all a part of this democracy that we live in. Can you come here and work with us to advance that work? And that's what I did. I went to the Brennan Center, and I will tell you, for anyone who doesn't understand that racial justice is at the core of democracy, I need them to go back to your classrooms and to the classrooms of your colleagues. Because they have to understand that as we are in this month of Black history and celebrating these achievements, there is no better time as we are also in an election year, as we also hear every day about court cases. And yesterday, I was around the Supreme Court as the barriers were up, as major cases are being litigated. We have to be clear-eyed and focused that if we are talking about protecting our democracy, if we are talking about elevating it, and if we are talking about making it true to its principles, which said that this nation was created for everyone, equality for all. If we are going to be true to those principles, then we need to understand the role that race plays, and we need to not be shy and afraid to talk about it and put it out there and be clear on how we have to attack it and lift up what we need to do to overcome biases. So because of that focus and because of that understanding, that's what led me to the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. It, for me, was always a dream to be able to take this passion and this focus on civil rights, human rights, and social justice and go to an organization that was focused on leveling the playing field. And that's also a part of the power you all have as educators. You all level the playing field. You all make it possible for the project girl to go through her educational experience and believe that she can grow up to become a lawyer. That's part of what we do at the foundation. As you heard Becky say, we were founded to be an organization whose mission is focused on empowering the global Black community. And we do that in 3 ways. We have a leadership institute, and our leadership institute has internships, fellowships, and scholarships, and we are proud to say we are the organization that puts more Black and brown interns on Capitol Hill than any other organization in the country. Our scholarships are not just scholarships based on merit. They are also based on what kind of community and experience you've had growing up, because we believe that any student who has the desire to do more and be more should have that opportunity. We know that everybody can't get straight A's. Everybody can't get straight A's, but we know that people have gifts that manifest themselves in different ways. And because of that, we want to provide those opportunities. So our scholarships provide opportunities for students based on merit, based on where you grew up, based on the kinds of community activism you are engaged in, because we believe that regardless of race, creed, color, economic circumstances, what kind of car your parents drive, and how big the house is that you live in, that you should have the opportunity to go to college and be who and what you want to be. In addition to our Leadership Institute, we also have a Center for Policy Analysis and Research, because we believe that you cannot do the work of legislating, of advocating, if people don't have tools and data in front of them. And we know right now in this country that having good data, having good facts, having accurate information is crucial. And that's what our Center for Policy Analysis and Research does. And within that center, we also have something called the National Racial Equity Initiative for Social Advancement. And that ensures that we are staying myopically focused on the issues around racial justice. And we don't just do this work in Washington, Becky. We do community conversations around the country. We're probably going to be in your backyard soon. We, last year, were in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we sat and met with the community activists in Tulsa who are focused on reparative justice that emanates from the 1921 massacre. We were in Detroit, sitting with community activists who want to talk to us about gentrification and what has happened in the city of Detroit and how it's being built up, but how there are some communities that are still being left out of the building up of Detroit. We had conversations here in our nation's capital about the changes in Washington, D.C., and about how so many of the people who have been a part of building up Washington, D.C. can no longer afford to even live, eat, and sleep here. But that's what that research is about. And that research is not just about providing it for the communities, because we believe that communities have to have those tools, but it's about providing resources for the lawmakers who have the power to create change, who have the power to create new laws and new regulations that change people's lives. So the work that we do is not just about us being here in Washington. It is about being in community, being in the neighborhoods, being in the community centers where people live, breathe, eat, and sleep, and where we know real change is happening. That is what the foundation is doing. And we use that connectivity to then undergird and ensure that the members of the Congressional Black Caucus are getting this information, that they're getting that research, that they're hearing from us about what we're learning in communities, so that that can inform the work that they are doing on the Hill. And we're doing it also with legislators around the country. I talk all the time with members of legislative Black caucuses. In fact, I started my early career, I worked for the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus in the early part of my career. We know that those legislators need these resources as well. That is how the work that we do comes together and culminates in creating change. Now, I will say this, I know lots of you, and you all are partners with us around the table for our annual legislative conference. That is the pinnacle of the time when we bring people together. It is actually the nation's largest, if not one, it's one of the largest, if not the largest, Black public policy conference around the country. But I tell you this, and I said this to my team and to our board of directors when they brought me on board. I said, I know that our annual legislative conference is important, and I know it always brings lots of people to Washington, but what I want people to know is that work that we do is done 365 days a year, not just in September. And even though everybody comes together and they have fun too, I told my team I'm going to buy them t-shirts. Annual Legislative Conference, it's about the people and not a party. Well, because that is what this work is about. That is what the work that you all do is about. It is about using our power to elevate, to build up, to give voice to people who don't have opportunities like I do and like you do, to put on lovely clothes every day and to come and talk to people in wonderful rooms like this. I tell people all the time, I am only using this mouth, and by the way, Miss John, what she also helped me to see at the end of 8th grade is that I had a big mouth. But she helped me to see that I had a big mouth that needed to be used for good. And that is my mantra that I live by. I have a big mouth, but I use it for good. We all have the power to do that. And you all as educators are primed more than anyone to touch myriad lives, to change the course of lives, and to help people see that they can be change makers themselves and they can make a difference. That is what power is about. Power is to be used for good. It is to be used to uplift. And let me say this. I recognize that I am privileged to be a woman who has this power seat. We're here to observe this today. Let me say this, and why it's so important to continue to uplift women like Becky Pringle. Yes. Because there are little girls and little boys all over this country who need a hero. Yes. Shero. Yes. Or zero, whatever you want to call it. They need that, and they need to see that despite statistics, that despite data that still tells us that women make less than men, despite statistics that tell us that after COVID, that there has been a disparate impact on women's ability to return to the workplace and still make the same money and still take care of their families, they still need examples of what they can achieve and how they can make a difference in this country and make the kinds of communities that they want to live in, make the kinds of schools that they want to be educated in, make the kinds of opportunities that they want to see made in communities like theirs. That is why it is so important for women's leadership to be held up. Not because the men aren't great, because you are, but because you need us standing right by your side, making a difference, and being an example of equality. Being an example of equality. So I'm going to end, Becky, where I started and where you passed that baton. Understand that the power you hold is precious. It's like Superman's kryptonite, okay? It can be a dangerous thing, but it is a thing that can make the difference in what people become and in how they believe in themselves. Because I had a Miss John who used her power the right way, I grew up to become a civil and human rights lawyer. Because my friend, who was a couple years older than me, Eric Selvey, across the street, had an educator who used that power the right way, he grew up to become a doctor. Because the other Nikki down the street had a teacher who used that power for good, she grew up and got an MBA and is now a corporate boss. That is the power that you all have. Please use it wisely. And please remember that it is only because of you and your colleagues and everything that you do, the partnerships that you have with organizations like CBCF, the partnerships that you have with other social justice organizations, it is only because of you that today the glass is half full. Those people who come to me and say, Nicole, what do you think about 2024? What do you think about what's happening in the country? What do you think we're gonna have to deal with? What I tell them is that we have people who are troublemakers in the best of all troublemaking words. Yes, yes. We have people who invest in and believe in our young people, and because of that, and because of what history has shown us educators can do, I am in no ways tired. Oh, that's right. I'm in no ways tired, and I am encouraged. So continue to be encouraged, continue to use your power, and continue to center the racial justice, the equitable focus that NEA makes such an important part of the work that you do, because with you and next to you and beside you, we will have the democracy that we all want, that we all know we deserve, and that we all know will create those promises that this nation guaranteed to all of us for equity, opportunity for all, and justice. Thank you all for everything that you do, and go and be powerful.